everyone, and welcome to this WFA panel discussion on the evolution and future of the workplace. I'm Ollie Theocaris, Head of Content for WFA. So we're delighted to have you all watching today, and I want to start by explaining a bit about how this session will work. So over the next 40 to 45 minutes, we are live. So at the start of this session, I'm going to be putting some questions to our panelists to discuss, and then it's down to you, our lovely viewers based all over the world. So you should see to the right of your screen that there is a questions tab. So if you post a question there, we'll put it to our speakers. So do ask away throughout the panel. And if you spot a question that you do you want it to be answered, then you can actually like it. And we'll try and discuss the most popular questions with the most likes at the end. So we're also going to be releasing a number of polls throughout the panel discussion. So if you want to share your opinions and see what others in the industry are thinking, then do participate in those. You will find those in the poll tab, and I will let you know when they appear. So I think that is all my intro done. I would now like to introduce our fantastic speakers. So today we have Maaike van Acht, who is the Vice President for HR for Europe, the Middle East, Africa and India at ADM. We have Kristen Bonham, who is the Vice President for Animal Nutrition and Health for North America at DSM. And we have Brittany, who is a Global Communications Manager at Novus. So thank you all for joining us today. And I'm going to start by asking you if you could all introduce yourselves and just offer a short overview of your role and your background. Maaike, we'll start with you. Can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Sure. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody, and it's so nice to be here. Thank you, Ollie, for that introduction. So my name is Maaike van Acht. I am responsible for HR for ADM and mainly focused on, as you mentioned, the European region. So we have approximately 10,000 employees here in the region. My background is I've always worked in HR, and I love the space of nutrition and providing food to the global marketplace. So I'm married with two sons, and we live in Switzerland. So that's me in a nutshell. Nice to be here.
Fantastic. Thank you for that overview. Kristen, can you now give us a bit of an introduction about yourself? Are you on mute?
Oh, fantastic. I thought I was late enough in the day, but good morning and good afternoon. Really excited to be here today. I will be celebrating in about a month my 1-year anniversary at DSM, which is very exciting and also very interesting during a global pandemic, switching careers. I actually started my career in agriculture. I was born and raised on a farm, and really it's been a great opportunity for me to serve in agriculture all my life. I spent about 25 years in animal agriculture, starting out, seed, biotechnology, and crop protection for about 25 years. And, I've really always tried to focus on what are some different perspectives that I can get. So I've been in sales, I've been in operations, I've done supply chain, business director from that perspective, just to get a broad sense of the business. And then really my role at DSM is I lead US and Canada as our region for DSM Animal Nutrition and Health. Really excited to be here today.
Fantastic. Thank you. And finally, Brittany, can you tell us a little bit about your role and background?
Yeah, thanks, Ollie. Again, like the others, very happy to be here. Very excited to talk about this topic today. So as Ollie said, my name is Brittany Pham, and I'm currently the Global Communications Manager for Novus International, and we're an animal protein feed supplement company. I've been with Novus for about 13 years. Most of that time I was in customer service, logistics, demand planning. And so when the pandemic hit North America and the shutdowns began, I was actually leading the North American supply chain team at that time. So my experience with the pandemic started with quickly transitioning a large team to a remote work environment, but then also implementing business continuity plans with our critical supply chain vendors. So since March of 2020, I helped establish, as I said, those business continuity plans, served on the crisis management team as the customer service lead, But then I switched roles and moved into my current role as communications manager. And so that I've been supporting our global communication strategies for both the crisis management team, but also internal and external messaging plans with our stakeholders. On the personal side, I'm a single mom of 2 young boys, 8 and 5 years old. So I can speak with great experience about managing, virtual schooling while working remotely and just trying to figure out how to, handle the chaos of the past year. So that's me in a very quick nutshell.
Thank you. I think all of you are working in slightly different roles. All of you have slightly different setups. So I'm really intrigued to get your thoughts on this quite interesting and forward-thinking subject. So I'm going to get stuck in with our first question. I want to get your opinions on how you each think the notion of the workplace has changed since the start of the pandemic. So Kristen, we'll start with you on this one. Can you offer your thoughts on that question?
Sure. And, as discussed, really moving to a brand new company, a brand new role, since the beginning of the pandemic, it's clear the way that our work is going to be changed. And I think we should also sometimes pause and say, wow, we've done a really good job, given many of our companies, overnight had to make significant adjustments from that standpoint. And I think very similar to some of the starting was the safety, health, and well-being of our employees, their families, and our customers really remain that top priority. So very much to what Brittany talked about is, one of the things early on was plant protocols and safety. We have many customers that rely on us for vitamins and other products that we can't have disruptions in the supply chain for the customers. So that was really a focus. And, there are pros and cons, but I really think returning to just normal, how we had before, it is really not acceptable. I think we have to shape the new normal with a hybrid working and really take advantage of the benefits of some flexibility around that, and give us enough time to be able to get together in person when we need it. But we also want to retain a desirable workplace and then also a strong culture.
No, some really good points there. I mean, I'll be the first to admit that I only worked from home maybe once every 2 or 3 months before March last year. So some of us, it's been a real shift, but I think it's been quite refreshing in a lot of ways for lots of people who didn't have those opportunities before. And Brittany, I'll come over to you now. What do you think about the idea of the workplace and how it's changed over the last few months?
Yeah, so I think that's a really interesting thing that we've gone through this past, year, 14 months, 15 months. And one of the things I've seen is that the tension between this concept where maybe upper management thought, people need to be in the workplace to be productive. And maybe the newer generations going, hey, I can work from anywhere. I want to have flexibility. I think that tension kind of shattered as we were forced into this sustained, experiment of remote work over a long period of time. And it's really shown that physical presence, it's not a prerequisite for productivity. And really it's about helping enable people to be productive in the best way that they can be. And for some people that's, hey, I want to be in the office a lot because I love being in person. Other people go, I want to have a balance and it's 2 days at home and it's 3 days in the office. And just understanding that that's no longer a prerequisite for us to physically be present to be productive. I think that was an interesting shift. I think the other interesting thing is that illusion that we had that life stopped when you went to work and then work stopped when you went home for the day, that's gone. And I mean, it's been gone for a long time because we have smartphones, we've got laptops, but I think that illusion really shattered because, you can probably see my cat sitting here. We saw people's kids come in the background. We heard the dogs barking. We just really lost, any illusion that we had that this is not, there's no separation of church and state. Right? Your life is your life and things come and go at different times. And so just that, I think, experience that we all had collectively has really helped build a lot of empathy in how we communicate with each other, how we maybe help rearrange schedules and move meetings to accommodate different things. And I really hope that empathy really stays with us long term, and that we see each other as people first post-pandemic and not just workers.
Yeah, I think that's a lovely point and so valid. I'd never seen my colleagues' children before, and having them come in and ask questions and things is always really fascinating for me. But you're absolutely right. It I suppose makes them look more human, and you see them outside of that kind of formal meeting environment, so it is very different. And finally, Micah, can you offer your thoughts on this question and tell us how you think the idea of the workplace has changed?
Yeah, simultaneous or similar to Kristen and Brittany, very similar here. So we shifted very quickly to remote work. It worked fantastically well. So ADM created stellar results in the midst of the pandemic. And why? I think because people adapted amazingly quickly, right? Whether it was IT organizing the technology or supply chain, making sure that customers could still get delivered. So, we've all read a lot of books about change management, but this happened in a very quick and kind of organized fashion, and everybody adapted wonderfully. So I just want to reiterate a few points. Kristen already mentioned health and safety. I think throughout the pandemic and also going forward, the safety and the well-being of people was obviously paramount. Similar to Brittany, many pandemic crisis meetings, many discussions about what do we do to keep our people safe. And there, I think it's really important to point out that, at least half of our workforce worked in the plants and had to physically come on site, right, to still make this food supply chain happen. And people did fantastic work in order to stay safe while they were still coming on site. And then, of course, the other side of the workforce, the office-based workforce, had to make the home arrangements and figure out, children and pets and other family members, etc. Everything has been mentioned, but everybody had to adapt really quickly, and I think people did a fantastic job.
Yeah, it's quite unique, I think, actually, in the food and ag industry, that we have so many people working in different ways. As you said, we have people working in plants, we have people working in R&D labs, we have people like me working in an office. So we have got a lot more to kind of think about than maybe the finance industry or the IT industry, So it's true, we've had to kind of deal with a lot more challenges. And I think, as the whole, the industry has coped really well with it, but I think it has really shifted, as you say, our opinions on how we kind of deal with things moving forward. So I'm going to delve a little deeper into the issue of working from home. So at this point, I'd love to get our audience's views on working from home. So a poll should appear in the poll tab shortly. We want to know how many days a week you think organizations in our industry should allow employees who are able to work from home. Of course, considering flexibility if they don't want to work that many days. Let us know your thoughts now. I'm really interested to hear what you all have to say. So, working from home. I'm going to start with you this time, Brittany. What are the biggest challenges to home working for both businesses and also the individuals who are working from home? And also, can we address any of those challenges, and how can we do so? Can you give us your thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. And I'll try not to share too many thoughts because I think there's, again, a lot of different aspects to that question. So one of the things that I found early on to be very important for, my team, myself, peers, is how important boundaries are, and being able to enforce and respect boundaries. Even before the pandemic hit, this, a go mentality, was very common. People are ambitious, they have a lot of plans, they want to get things done. So burnout was already a risk. And then I feel like the pandemic was kind of a steroid injection where we just had that much more chaos and commotion going on, both on the work and personal side. So, as that risk of burnout got bigger, our physical and social worlds were getting smaller. I love to use the example of, it's hard to work when I have a sink full of dirty dishes staring me in the face. It's just really tough when you kind of feel all the inputs all the time. So it was important for me to establish boundaries, build up my schedule and go, this is how I'm dedicating my time right now. Creating physical barriers, I think, are important if you're able to do that. Can I work in a separate room? And so Novus was very helpful in, supplying the right equipment, that people needed, whether it was extra monitors, laptops, whatever. That was important. So I think that's one aspect, but I'll let my other panelists add their thoughts to that.
Absolutely. And you can always jump in at the end if there's any that you think we've missed, and let us know then, Brittany. Micah, I'm going to come to you next. Can you add to this and offer your thoughts on this subject?
Yeah, one of the things I've seen from my HR perspective is some people really were isolated during the pandemic. I think we've talked a lot about families with children and the craziness of that, but there's also been a lot of people who were alone and felt quite isolated during the pandemic, especially in countries where lockdowns were very, very strict. And so I have seen an increase of, let's say, mental well-being challenges in general. And for me, it's everything to do with how do people exchange energy and how do you socially connect with others. And of course, the pandemic wreaked havoc with that, right? So the challenge for me, the biggest challenge of, for example, a scenario where you would be fully remote is just the lack of social cohesion and the lack of interconnectedness with people and connecting to the ADM, to the company culture. So for me, that's been the biggest challenge throughout the pandemic.
No, I think that's very valid. My partner actually works in an office and I work from home. So when he comes home, I ask him every question under the sun because I am starved of social interaction throughout the day. So it's I don't think you realize how much you miss it and being in that office environment, even if you're not talking to anyone, just having people around you. So yeah. I completely agree.
The coffee talk, right?
Absolutely. Just walking to get a glass of water and seeing humans is quite nice. So I'm totally with you there. And Kristen, I'm going to come to you now. Can you share some thoughts on the challenges of working from home and how we address some of these?
Sure. And as far as the coffee cooler, I miss that as well. And I was going to say there's only so much coffee chat that 3 teenage kids want to have in a day, right? And so, that is a missing piece. I think one of the biggest challenges that I've seen, and it's already been mentioned, but I think it's real and something that we need to deal with, is just that ability to disconnect from work, and early on, and it depends by country. I know this is a global call, but there wasn't really any places that you can go. I know now in North America, things are starting to open up a little bit, but that is how do you draw that separation? And I think given some of the challenge of separating that, I know with the people that work for me, sometimes there's important business things that we need to talk about, but sometimes we just need to check in on each other, and it's not like you're seeing that in person, but you can see through the screen that somebody's got a lot going on or a kid was sick or whatever. Let's just take the first 10 minutes and how are you doing? I think the conversation around wellness and being there for each other is so important. You're not going to get the business results if we're not focusing on that. Just to share a quick tool that we developed at DSM, and it's actually called a Team Pact. And I think teams throughout the globe are really working on this right now. And it's kind of going back to the basics that we're going to hybrid working to say, how do we want to work together? What are the standards if we're going to have a meeting where some people are there and some not? There's some concerns about, let's say you have 5 people in a room and 2 people have to call in remote. How do you keep them as part of the conversation, right? How are we going to operate? One thing is off screen time. We did a whole podcast at DSM on it's okay to be off screen if you need to, right? Or sometimes we have Friday conference calls and that's not on screen. And so just really establishing norms with your team and sticking to those things, I think is a really important as we look at going back in some cases in the office, in some cases remote. But I think really going back to it is different. It's going to be different. And I think, checking in with each other, how are people doing is one of the most important things that we can do in any business, whether you're the leader or whether you're the colleague. It's so important to be able to do that.
There's some really good points there. I think the hybrid model we are going to have to adopt for these meetings, you're absolutely right. It actually brings a whole new set of challenges for us to be able to kind of sort through over the coming months. Where I'm based at the moment in the UK, we haven't really had much kind of full opening up yet, so it hasn't really been an issue, but it certainly will be. And you're right, people could feel excluded. I could see that happening, certainly. And I did want to ask about another issue, and that was trusting employees. Now, I've worked at businesses before where we've not been able to work from home because we haven't been trusted to work effectively in the home environment. I don't have that at the moment, thank goodness, but that does exist. So, you know, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think attitudes to this have changed quite substantially since the start of the pandemic? Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, sure. I think everything in a working relationship, especially within teams, is on the basis of trust. And the role of a team leader is to not just stay connected to the team and to care about what's happening in the team, but also to continue to stay in touch about the results, right? So I think in an office setting, team leaders were able to maybe check up on the work by just walking over to someone and looking over someone's shoulder, you know. But in this environment where we have been working remotely, the measurement of performance was much more based on the output and the goals you set. So I think there was much more focus on clarity of goals. Let's follow up on those goals very frequently and really lead your team on the basis of that frequent communication and frequent checking in on output rather than on being present in the office. And I think that's been a very healthy shift from a performance management standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Just to add on to that, you know, you ask about, you know, having that trust with employees. One of the biggest advantages as we look at hybrid workplace at DSM and across the board is how do we empower our people? You know, it was absolutely critical and important before we managed through this. But I think even more so as we look moving forward is how do we empower our organization? And I think you have to have that trust. We should have had the trust before, but it's just different circumstances. And I think, you know, we have to take that step forward to say the new workplace, and when you think about the talent you're trying to acquire, they're going to demand some of these types of things, whether it's the flexibility, the empowerment, the, you know, self-paced, you know, really self-guided. We really have to trust our employees and empower them in the jobs that they're doing because there's too much going on. I actually think we can be much more efficient with our time and focused on business results and, you know, empowerment. To be able to move the business forward. So I think that trust is absolutely foundational as we move forward.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think what both Micah and Kristen were saying, you know, I think an important element, you know, in building that trust is authentic communication, very thoughtful communication. You know, as Kristen said, you know, where you're making time in your meeting agendas to have just those, you know, emotionally intelligent conversations, you know, that's not just about business, it's about the people. But then also when you're using that 30 minutes or 60 minutes that you have on a Teams call, it's also effective in talking about results, you know, and focused on what are the tangible things that we're trying to achieve, you know, as a team. And so I think it's just helping people think through how do we better communicate, you know, as teams, as organizations to trust that everybody's doing what they need to be doing when they need to be doing it. And I don't have to be on site with them looking over their shoulder, you know. And so I think we've seen a shift, at least in Novus, in how we're communicating with people and what we're sharing, what we're asking them to communicate back, what are the tools we're using. You know, we've got different tools now going. So I think that's an important aspect as well to help, you know, like Kristen was saying, empower employees.
It's, I mean, I don't want to generalize, but we have had many members of the WFA community come forward to say they don't feel that they're great at selling themselves. So actually moving to more of an output-based model where your results are being kind of reviewed, and that is the thing that is, you know, demonstrating your work, is actually quite positive for a lot of women and people who maybe don't feel confident in putting themselves out there in the same way, but are doing fantastic jobs. So yeah, I agree with what all three of you have said. I think it's a really nice shift, and I think can be really beneficial for our sector moving forward. And that actually brings me very nicely onto my next question, which is about diversity and inclusion. So I want to ask each of you if you believe any of the developments that we've seen since we started changing our attitudes towards the workplace have had an impact on our drive for greater diversity and inclusion in our sector. Michael, we'll start with you on this one. Can you give us your thoughts?
Yeah, it's already come up earlier, but I think the authenticity of what happened in people's lives and their work lives came through much more, right? We see each other much more as human beings and what's happening in your world rather than just a work colleague. So I think the care that we had for each other in our teams and the care for other colleagues and taking care of the safety of other colleagues became so paramount. So from a D&I perspective, I just believe that it's been super critical that both men and women were able to reconfigure how they did their work-life organization. And we've had men and women ask for flexibility. And so it equals the playing field a little bit more. And, I strongly encourage to always have those discussions about that it's not just the woman taking care of the children, but that there is a balance within the family. And of course, everybody makes their private decisions. I completely understand that, but it has created a much more equal playing field where everybody was working in the same space all of a sudden. And again, that authenticity of bringing your whole self to work and to your team, I think also has helped D&I. And when we look at, because we were very concerned about, is turnover going to increase among women, and which research has shown, right, which has happened during the pandemic. And glad to say that at least in our company we did not see that. But I think it's a super important metric to track and to understand, like, how has all of this impacted the balance between men and women in the workplace?
Really good points there. And I think our WFA survey, which we put out every year, we are going to be comparing last year and the year before to this year, because I think we're going to see some quite dramatic shifts. Even when we looked at the number of people who were made redundant during the pandemic, we did see more women being made redundant. And our fear was they were taking redundancy to kind of take on more familial roles. But I think we'll be able to judge next year if that is the case, or if it's actually been positive for the entire sector and we've really kind of allowed more flexibility for men and women involved. Right, I'll go to Kristen next on this one. So what do you think these developments mean for diversity and inclusion in our sector?
Yeah, I really appreciate Micah's comments, because, many of my thoughts are very similar from that perspective. And if you talk about some of the statistics, there are some statistics that aren't in favor of supporting diversity and inclusion, right? Seeing less women, those different types of things. But I think within every challenge is an opportunity regardless. And so if you think about it, this notion of going to hybrid workplace, I think can provide a great opportunity for more diversity and inclusion in the workplace. One of the biggest things that I think about, especially when you look at, if we look at recruiting more female talent into our organization as an example, and I think it looks like it's going to some of those questions in the chat, is not only how do we bring those people on board, because, hey, we feel like we've got a pretty good environment, flexible workplace, those types of things, but how we do development is going to be so critical in the future. If you think about it, even myself joining a new role, I've not met and probably won't for some period of time my global peers for almost a year and a half, right? It's not like I'm walking into an office and, hey, you parked your car and we're walking in together, or you just pop your head or by the water cooler. We no longer have some of those opportunities. And so what I worry about is, what are those opportunities and are we making time for those things? So as an example, as much as I'm trying to balance, making sure I'm getting out of office from time to time, when I'm in my office, what am I doing to personally plan for myself? What does my plan look like? Where do I want to get to in 5 years, and back into it and start writing down some of those things, working with a peer, working with a manager. I think we can attract the people, that diverse workforce. But I also think making sure we're super intentional, especially now with development, is going to be really critical for us moving forward.
Yeah, some really good points there too. I think everyone should be taking a bit of time to think about themselves, and I felt like we've all had to deal with fighting quite a few fires, particularly those in managerial roles over the past year and a half. So yeah, now is the time to actually think about not just yourself, but also the wider team and how you can kind of influence what's going on there. It's a really good point. And finally, Brittany, can you offer your opinions on this subject, please, as well?
Sure. So I don't think that remote work is the holy grail, to solving diversity challenges, but I think it's an important tool that we can use, we can leverage. As Kristen said, we've got opportunity here. Just think about, simply, households that have one car, it's easier for them to manage, if one person can work remotely, that's going to be helpful. Or if a parent can be at home, for the bus drop off, because they're working from home, that's less, maybe they're spending financially on after school care. And so there are some benefits, that people can realize there, the help, like Kristen said, attract people into the workforce. But very importantly, how do you keep people, because that in-person conversation that happens, that in-person mentorship, when you happen to run into your VP, in the lunchroom or in the hallway and have a chat and, oh, I was thinking about, this project and I had a thought, oh, hey, let's schedule time. Those, happenstance conversations don't happen when you're in a remote environment. So I think senior leadership taking the time to think through, how can we make opportunities for these conversations? Is it a formal mentorship program that we didn't need before, but maybe we need now, in this environment? How do we match up new employees with maybe tenured employees and help them, become familiar with the culture of the company and just have someone to ask random questions to? Those are things that happened, pretty organically when everybody's in the office, but it doesn't happen organically in this environment. So you have to be a little bit more disciplined about practices you're using to help foster those conversations. And those are things I've been talking with, our leadership team, going, hey, when we are in the office and, if you're here, senior leadership 2 days a week, you probably should have some just open office time where people can stop by. You shouldn't be booked up in meetings all day. It should just be, open door access. So, things like that.
A really good point. And I think with the issue of inclusion, our workplaces were a place where you could see people who were like you, who looked like you, who maybe were the same sexuality as you, maybe the same age as you. And now we're kind of siloed. I don't speak to that many people outside of my team in the same way that I did before. So we might struggle, as you say, to retain people because maybe you don't feel it's as inclusive an environment before if you don't have those interactive sessions where you're meeting others within the business. So yeah, it's a really tricky one. And I'd love to know what our audience think actually on an area that is, we do struggle with a bit in food and ag, but we're getting much better at, and that is diversity in leadership positions specifically. So I've created a poll, it will pop up shortly, and it's, do you think more smart working and working from home will provide an environment that will support more diversity and inclusion in leadership roles? So I'd love to get your thoughts on that, and we can review those opinions at the end. Now we're going to be looking at some of the questions you've been posting soon. So if you do have any more to ask, send them through now. So hopefully we'll have time to get to them. But before we do that, I have one final question. And we're going to start with you on this one, Kristen. As vaccinations are increasing worldwide, what decisions are businesses making in terms of what the new workplace looks like? What do you think the workplace will look like moving forward? Can you give us your thoughts on that, please?
Sure, absolutely. The biggest thing for me is the workplace of the future should not look like the workplace of the past. We've spent a lot of time at DSM as a leadership team, as a global leadership team looking at this, and we see it as a great opportunity to move forward, really increase our competitive advantage in what we have to offer in a work environment. I think one of the most important things too is, much as we think about, hey, we're going to start out going back to offices for those that are in offices, a couple days a week, whatever that looks like. That is one piece of it. The other critical piece, and we talked about this a little bit, was trust and empowerment, is we're really providing that ownership of that discussion because people have different circumstances. So really empowering our managers to be able to have that conversation with care and concern with employees on how we want to move forward in the future. I am so excited about all the focus that we've had on wellness over the past couple months. As an example, you know, from podcasts from our CEO to passing out awesome vitamins that we produce at DSM. I hope that all continues as well. So I think the whole wellness side, mental health side is extremely important. And then really empowering our managers, employees to figure out a plan that works for each other is really critical.
Fantastic. Really good ideas there, and things we should all be thinking about implementing to create our workplace of the future. Brittany, have you got anything to add there? What do you think the workplace of the future will look like?
Yeah, thanks. So I think what we've heard a lot, and from the panelists today, but also from whether it's peers in your own workplace or just friends, is that the social perks of being in the office are so important for people's wellness. And so maybe redesigning office spaces or finding ways to help bring people together when they're on site. I'm fortunate enough to be in an office where we have a gym on site and a lunchroom on site, and so I would engage with my peers when I am there, in the gym, and hey, we're doing this class together. And then we have lunch together. And so, those are really fantastic perks to have. So if it's possible to have them, and that when people are in the office, they aren't just there at their cubicle, or they're not just in a meeting, because those, while those are important, to the business function, it's not the whole employee. It's not addressing the whole person. And so creating those social opportunities that can happen on site, I think would be a wonderful thing to explore for companies. And the other thing, that I see happening, because we talked a lot about maybe the remote working, but Micah mentioned earlier in manufacturing facilities, people who've been on site pretty much the whole time during the pandemic. And so how does life change for them, or how do our policies adapt for continuing to support them in the event of other, public health situations? I think our environmental health and safety teams, have gotten spotlighted, this year about how critical they are, to be prepared to handle things like this, and the importance of their role to crisis management for protecting our employees. And so I think putting more focus on that, and maybe we can have better conversations about preparing our plans for the future, to support employees, is important as well.
Yeah, two really good points there. And Micah, can you offer your thoughts on this as well? What do you think the workplace of the future is going to look like?
Yeah, I think offices will, of course, be places where people come together, but for what purpose, right? And I think the office of the future will be a place where teams come together to collaborate and to have moments where idea exchange or innovation happens, because I think we've all noticed that through screens, your world has become a little smaller. And as you indicated, Ollie, the groups of people you meet with, it tends to be the same groups over and over again. So I hope that in the office, people from different teams come together, lots of collaboration moments, lots of moments to innovate and think more about this future, right? Because we've all been in this here and now moment. So just the space to collaborate and be together, and also meet people outside of your immediate Zoom and Teams network. I really look forward to that. I do think that the Teams component should not be underestimated here, because the work, to a large extent, the content of your work will dictate to a large extent what is or isn't possible. But as a leader, we also have responsibility to look after the team element and make sure that, again, we have that equal playing field. And the final dimension I want to bring is, most of us these days, Kristen, Brittany, you as well, we work in global virtual teams, right? My team is not sitting here. My team is all over the place. So we're used to working virtually anyway. And so what the office brings is, again, those moments to connect with others, build the company culture, make sure that we also have moments where we can have face-to-face training, face-to-face innovation sessions, meet with our customers. We haven't talked about the customers yet, but meet with our customers. So I think that's a really important role for the office going forward.
Yeah, again, some really good points there. And I think one thing I do feel that you act a bit differently on a Teams meeting to the way you act at an in-person meeting. And I think you get different reactions from people. You can't see body language in the same way, often the cameras are a bit blurry. You can't see everyone's facial expressions at all times. And I think being in person, having those strategic collaborative meetings and being able to eat some donuts at the same time, I'm very much looking forward to having days in the office where we can do that as a team. So I do completely agree with you there. Those are all the questions that I had. So we're actually going to look at some of the questions that have come through from our audience now. I think we've had quite a few already. There is one here that has 8 likes. Okay. We saw that when we moved to working from home, we had to add more meetings to stay connected. As people are starting to go back into the office, are you seeing the number of meetings decline? Does anyone want to give their opinion on that?
I would love to give my opinion on this. I think it's a good question. I think one of the I think we should all reflect on what we've gone through. And there are ways in working that we had in the past that we do not want to bring forward, right? How did we work in the past and maybe wasn't a good best practice, and let's not bring that forward. The one thing, if you think about, bringing what we bring to the office is, wanting to look at how we make decisions. That's one of the biggest things that I see. So I think with teams, we made a Teams meeting that really could have been an email. I know nobody wants to admit that at times, but we all had some of those Teams meetings that were an hour that could probably been an email. And I think we overthought decision-making from time to time. So I think those are a couple things that I really see we could get better at moving forward. I know me now getting back out and traveling, I can't, maintain the amount of Teams meetings with going to the airport, going to see customers. Like you said, that's one of the best things that we can do. So I think we have to tweak some of those things, but I also think we have to work on decision making. And then really, can we do things in emails? Do we have to have a meeting? We've got to trim back on some of those things, in my opinion, overall, or shorten them.
Mm-hmm. Does anyone else have anything to add to that one?
Yeah, I'll just maybe echo what Kristen was saying about decision making. And I think one of the causes at times of too many meetings is it's not clear who can make the decisions, and so you often are managing by consensus. And so that's really related to organizational structure and empowerment, how you're giving authority and accountability. And those are some things that our company has worked through in the past year, trying to figure out how do you streamline these things, because it's not sustainable, for people to have that many meetings, to have to make that many decisions by consensus. It doesn't, it's not good business practice. And it's also not helping employees develop. If you never have to take accountability for a decision, it's not helping you as a professional. So, those are just some, I think, things that we've seen over the past year that it's not really necessarily related to the pandemic, but we kind of saw because of the pandemic how many things maybe were happening in person. We all of a sudden saw them happening, in these metrics over how many meetings are happening at Teams or through Teams. So, yeah, thanks for those starting thoughts, Kristen. They're very helpful.
Yeah. I mean, what I unfortunately have not seen meetings decline yet, but we are still very much, in a global company. Some people are already back at work. Some people are still fully remote. It really depends on the country you're in. So I have not seen number of meetings decline yet. But what I have seen is an opportunity when you do meet face-to-face again to, for example, have some moments where we can roll out training, to leadership training. We've done a lot virtually, but some leadership training, it's also so nice to be able to do it face-to-face again. And so we've chosen some distinct topics to train our leaders on. One of them is, for example, focus, right? So it goes back to decision making and how do you really prioritize your work and how do you make sure people are working on the right stuff together with a focus on, empathy and building good teams. But so far, I have not seen the number of meetings decline, unfortunately.
Olympia, maybe one suggestion just to offer up. So, I think that was a great question about what do we do? And I know everyone on the call today they're investing in themselves by being on this call, right? What can I pick up? What can I learn from? To me, that's a great opportunity. If you think about what is a new leadership opportunity I have that I didn't have prior to this, give some thought in your organization, let's say today on the meetings, and go to your manager. Maybe you have a core group that's meeting on a weekly basis and say, hey, I believe some of the situations are now stabilized. What if we would do bi-weekly meetings or talking with your manager? I mean, this is something, it seems simple, but I think it's really a great opportunity to step up during, really how we're figuring out what the new normal is, for you as leaders to step up to say, hey, how might we approach this differently? That could be, a challenge that people could take on or look at. Because I think as leaders, we're looking for, we've come up with some ideas of how we think the new hybrid model should work and what we can do for best practices. Our employees have the best ideas, and that's where we have to glean them from.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think a lot of the time as well, it's the members of the team who are experiencing it firsthand. And if you can get opinions from them about what is and isn't working, like you say, you're going to get a really true picture of how you should model things moving forward. We've got another question here where someone wants a few tips. We struggle with morale issues from having some people in the same building and some people working from home, when others do not have that option because they're production line workers. So all three of your businesses do experience this. Do any of you have any recommendations for counteracting this?
Yeah, I'll share a few thoughts or learnings from the experience we had this past year. So at our corporate facility, we have on-site R&D workers who've been there since basically the first week of the pandemic. They might have gone home those first couple of weeks while we thought shutdowns were short-lived, but they very quickly had to go back to the office while many of the other employees there continue working remotely. And I think one of the biggest misses that we had up front was just not having a forum for those employees to share what they were thinking and what they were feeling. So it came through, kind of informal channels. You'd hear from someone else, oh yeah, the R&D team's really frustrated. And so not having a clear way for them to share what was going on and just what they were feeling was a big miss up front. We were able to rectify that, thankfully, and just hear, that they were feeling isolated. They were feeling lonely. They were feeling frustrated, by seemingly, very stringent rules, about having a mask even when you're alone in the space, because you never know who might walk in behind you, things like that. So being able to just have conversations with them helped. But we did do some things, over the past year, such as giving them some, bonuses, some gift boxes, bringing lunch on site and sharing, some benefits with them that, remote workers aren't getting, but hopefully showing our appreciation for what they're going through. But it's tough. I mean, it's difficult to make people feel, that, those white collar workers have the easy life, sitting at home on their couches with their laptop while I'm still here, whether it's at the production facility or at the R&D lab. So, I don't think I have a clear-cut answer exactly for how do you make it all better. But those were some learnings that we had as far as the early misses and things that we tried to do throughout the year to show that we appreciated what they were going through.
Yeah, some really good points there. So, are other speakers, or anything to add, or shall I move on to our next question?
Brittany, I think just very, very much similar to the comments that you had. I think the recognition piece, I know one of the things that I've been trying to do everything starts at our plants, right? And if we don't have things going there, we don't have products to sell, those types of things, but being visible where you can, whether that's a Teams meeting, whether it's including on town halls. I know now that we've been able to start traveling, I've gotten to, 2 of the 4 plants, doing those types of things. I think to your point, are really important from that standpoint. So showing that care and concern as we move forward.
Yeah, and maybe finally to add to that, we are in the same situation, and I think it's really important that we first of all, recognize and understand that people went above and beyond the normal call of duty. And so we also had forms of recognition for that. And moving forward, I think it's one of the reasons why I do not envision a situation where people will be remote fully. You know, I think we need to have a situation where we interact. And so, you know, the flexibility in manufacturing will always be different and more limited. The leadership is hugely important, and the focus also for our production colleagues on health and well-being. Safety was there all along, of course, but health and well-being, and make sure that we come up with benefits and policies that benefit everybody, regardless of where people work. But again, flexibility is so much driven by the nature of your work that, you know, it's not, that piece is not an equal playing field, I'm afraid.
So I think it's a bit of a challenge, but there are things you can try and implement to try and, you know, ease those concerns from those workers and make sure that everyone feels it's a bit fairer. We have so many questions, it's fantastic. So I'm going to ask for a quick short answer on this one. And that is, do you have any recommendations on how to drive employee engagement as we make working from home a norm? Small things such as hallway talks, stopping by someone's office, and lunches kept people connected, but aren't easy options anymore. But virtual calls lack the connection that face-to-face carries. We've spoken a bit about this, but is there anything you think we can do about that for those employees working from home?
You know, one of the things that I would just share that you can do is be visible. And it may be on a Teams meeting, not in person, more likely. But one of the things that I've tried to do during this is really talk about every different role in the organization and how they add to the success. And I think as we're talking through the business about what's going on in the production facilities, you know, we're going through an integration with another company, what's going through that. Don't assume you just need to talk to people about what's going on in their function. I think the more that we can talk about our business holistically, builds people's comfort level and so shows inclusion from that standpoint.
I'm going to ask one more question before we round this up. We've already gone over time, but these questions are great. And this one is interesting because I don't know of many companies doing this. So smarter working is providing autonomy for those who are able to have flexibility at home, but it also has the benefit of reducing some potential office bills. Have you considered supporting your teams with potential increases in internet or energy bills? Because of course, this is something that a lot of companies haven't thought about yet because we've been focusing on getting everyone up to speed. Are any of your companies offering anything there, or should we be thinking about it a bit more?
In Europe, it has come up because, of course, here we have an environment where we have codetermination with works councils. And so in some countries, that topic has come up. Of course, people also have had the benefits of having less dollars go out or money go out to commuting. So far, we have not made any final conclusions there or any policies of such kind. But it has come up here in a few countries, and we are still working through that.
It's a tricky one because, the amount that I save on not traveling into central London every day way kind of counteracts the heating bill I would have been paying. So you're right. Well, we're not any less well off, but it's quite interesting to think about that. Does anyone else have anything to add? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kristen.
And I was just going to say, you know, overall, I think there is an expectation if you look at, you know, what we're doing, taking cars off the road from an emission standpoint, you know, being well to the environment, those types of things, you know, are all important. But I would say overall, you know, our travel budget per se should be able to go down. You know, if you think about that, who would have ever thought we could have as much business that we could do with a customer on a Teams meeting as we could be in person? We have conferences where we would have sent 5 people. Hey, we can probably work with 2 and have a couple be remote. So I think that, you know, financial responsibility, being fiscally responsible, is a really key piece of this moving forward overall. And so, you know, hopefully the employees can benefit from some of the savings that you suggested, and I think the company overall, because there's probably some opportunities there.
Absolutely. I am going to quickly review our polls that we set earlier so we can get some thoughts on that, and then I'll round it up. So we asked how many days a week should organisations let employees work from home. 40% said 3 days, 31% said 2 days, 24 said 5 days. So a lot of people are saying they want to be in the office maybe 3-4 days a week on average we're probably looking at here, which I think is probably what we expected. And then also we asked, do you think remote working will provide an environment that will support more diversity in leadership roles specifically? 45% said yes, we will see more diversity in leadership roles, which is really great to hear. And we did have 38% saying they're not sure if it's going to make any difference. Only time will tell. As I said before, we have our WFA survey that we can refer to and have a look at to see how the industry is tracking. But thank you all today to our speakers for answering all these questions so insightfully. I really want to thank Brittany, Micah and Kristen for their thought-provoking and really forward-thinking views on what we're going to be doing moving forward, and some tips as well on what's going to be beneficial. Thank you to everyone for tuning in, for asking so many fantastic questions. There were loads, we couldn't get through all of them, but next time hopefully we will. We hope that you join us for future content from WFA, and we hope you have a great day from wherever you are in the world. Goodbye everyone.
Thank you. Goodbye.